I would like to take the discussion forward by introducing one more area, which is a related area, that's about creativity. And what does creativity mean with respect to the machines? And where are we at present in this field? So the way I am structuring my talk today in the discussion, I will call it more of a discussion, is that half of my time I will spend on creativity itself, and because this field has been studied and it has been, the word is so vernacular that everybody uses it. So we might have many different kind of definitions or the perceptions of the word creativity. So I'll just try to bring that to a kind of a common understanding in my first 15 minutes. And then I will touch upon the computational creativity, give you a flavor of the different kind of work that happens here and where I feel it is headed and how it's interesting for us. Is my audio clear? Then I'll shift on to my. So when we use the word creativity, let's now kind of distill it to this definition right from the onset, that it's the human faculty which helps us create new and the valuable in the context of the old. And it's often, we tend to think of the creativity as something that gives rise to only things new. But creativity has to be combined with something called valuable, because whatever you produce has to be, at the end of the day, accepted by the society and whosoever is the consumer of that product or a piece of whatever creative artifact that you're producing. And the kind of things that you can produce can be concept, ideas, forms, structure, products, etc., etc. If you look at the human history, it has actually been a march with the creativity. For better or worse, wherever we are, see where we started from. We were living in caves, and to the present modern civilized societies that we are in has been a result of various innovations that happened on the way, from the telemarks to the flop computers that we have. But let us, just as a disclaimer before I go further, is that mostly I will be talking about the human creativity, but let's not forget that there are animals and the birds which also display it to some extent. For example, if you have heard about the bowerbird, it's very creative in the way it arranges his nest, and that is to kind of attract the female partner. And it can pick up anything. It tries to arrange them so you can have shells, you can have flowers, you can have some fruits kept there, and you can even pick up coins and your bottle caps, etc. So this is, so we can say that it's something inherent in the nature itself to create something new and something aesthetically pleasing. It has a history too. And starting from, if we have to give some kind of mythology background to it, and if you look at just, for example, on the Greek mythology, it used to be that the creativity is the preserve of the gods. And Zeus used to have 9 daughters called the 9 muses, who used to be the goddesses of different types of art, science, and literature. And it was believed that anybody who wanted to kind of do something had to have a kind of a creative inspiration or a blessing from these goddesses. And it so turned that Prometheus was the one who actually changed the scheme of things. He is believed to kind of steal the creative spark from the gods and bring into the humans, and for which he was tormented and for the rest of his life. And you can further study this story. So it's interesting. So the main idea here is that because creativity was thought to be something very mysterious, it's something that the ordinary person cannot have, and it's something even a person cannot have access to it until we are blessed by the gods. But as the sciences progress, as the human studies have progressed, we have tried to kind of understand it and see is where we are and see that it's actually very prevalent. And I'll just go the 2 aspects of creativity and why it is so important for our society and why it's so essential for us is from the Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, where he says that most of the things that are interesting, important to us as a human, whether it's languages, values, artistic expression, scientific understanding, and technology, is the result of creativity. In fact, he goes on to say that human beings distinguish themselves from the rest of the species because we are like 98% apes, but the rest of things that distinguish, one of the principal things is the creativity. It's not just that it's the ability to create something new, but we human beings don't engage in something until we find it meaningful or fruitful or something useful, or something that we take joy in. And one of the other aspects, psychologically speaking, that is kind of purported about creativity is that it's something that gives us maximum satisfaction. When we engage in a kind of a creative pursuit, in whichever field that we are, whether we are in artistic field, whether we are scientists doing our research, or whether we are players, you might have heard something, getting into the zone and doing something. A similar kind of a concept in the creativity literature, which is called the flow state, is the state where we are so much engrossed in something that nothing else seems to matter. And that is a kind of state that gives us a real meaning to live along. So creativity and its importance for human society is not just that it helps us to create something new, but it's also very essential for our own survival. Now, let us try to build a kind of thing. When we talk about creativity, what kind of things that come to our mind? And I'll try to bring this definition from the perspectives of the people, of the three set of people. And there are many classifications, many classes that can be, but I'll just focus on 2, 3. Let's look at the creative artists. And just as an example, take the example of Leonardo Da Vinci. And as I'm talking about them, I'll just keep on hinting about the creative processes that they are known for. Now, he was a Renaissance man. He's an almost iconic Renaissance man. He's a polymath. He was an architect. He was an engineer. He was a theater artist. He used to produce plays. And his process of creativity was that he used to kind of diligently go through the understanding of the field. And it said that even something like a Mona Lisa smile was a result of his endless hours in dissecting the human body. And in this particular case, understanding the link between the facial nerves and our lips and how the smile is created. This is what is kind of usually said about the secret behind Mona Lisa. Okay. Let's take another example of one. Give me a second. Ludwig van Beethoven. He was a person who turned deaf in his life. And in later later part of his life, he could not hear anything, but he still composed music. And his impact on the music has been right from the classical to the romantic era, the kind of symphonies or the concertos that he created. And his process was also very deliberate, that he used to kind of spend years in building up his final compositional concept. He will start with a concept and keep on iterating over it and take even up to years to come up with the final composition that he would have in his mind. So again, a process of where you kind of understand a field deeply, that even if you lose a sense, you do not lose the capability and your ability to kind of deliberately work on something to create a artistic or a creative piece. Quickly go through, we all are kind of familiar with these personalities. So Isaac Newton, for example, his creative process, that he went through 20 long years of study, on which supposedly started with the fall of an apple and resulted in, at some point in his Principia Mathematica, the study of philosophy. And he was a kind of self-didactic person in the sense that he used to kind of self-study into the things and spend endless hours in keeping the thing front of him unless he was clear about every little detail about that particular subject. Thomas Alva Edison, the person with more than 1,000 patents, who kind of from electricity to gramophone to the setting up of electrical companies, we have heard about it's like 99% hard work and 1% inspiration. And he used to kind of diligently go through experiment and trying out the things. Marie Curie, the first woman to get a doctorate in Europe and also to get the Nobel Prize twice. The specialty of her process, again, was a very diligent hard work, plus a ability to indulge into what is called a divergent and then convergent thinking. These are very specific creativity exercises in which that you kind of list out many different options and then diligently evaluate each option and eliminate whichever is not useful for your case. Albert Einstein kind of transformed the very field that he was working in. And his process, what he brought to kind of his theory of relativity and its impacts on the quantum mechanics and other things, his process was quite visual in nature. And he used to think in terms of intuitions and imaginations. And he used to like to solve the things visually before he used to put logic and scientific thinking into it, and then kind of, because that's what we finally need as a scientific artifact to, for an explanation that can be shared by everyone. So different people, different creative types, different kind of processes, some similarities, some very peculiar aspects. I quickly touch upon two personalities in another field about entrepreneurship. We have heard of Walt Disney, animator himself, and then a very successful businessman who set up the whole animation industry. He was known to kind of visualize both the business scenarios as well as the animation themes. And he was considered to be a perfectionist who will keep on working until he gets the thing as correct as he wanted them to be. We know about the Steve Jobs, and we all experience these products even to this day. He was influenced by many fields, and he was also influenced by humanities and arts. He made design as a principal selling force through his whichever kind of enterprise he got into. He was also a person who used to kind of holistically think about the things. So if he brought out the concept of putting 1,000 songs in your pocket through iPod, he also set up the iTunes streaming service. It's the setting up of this whole ecosystem that made even the iPod and the resulting Apple enterprise very, very successful and set it on the parts of its kind of a growth which continues to this day. So I just talk about the personalities which have had kind of an impact on their fields, which kind of created and charted the course of the history and created kind of a paradigm shift in the things. But there is a creativity in the mundane that we all experience, that we get indulged in day to day. And I'll just classify it later, but just mention fewer things. So whenever we are working from morning to the night, for example, we are cleaning our utensil and almost all of the activities we have to do nowadays during these COVID times ourselves. Whether it's kind of washing, the kind of taking decision how to vacuum, or ironing clothes, or washing dishes, or taking your dog for a walk, or driving, etc. All these activities, whenever we are indulging in them, and people who are dealing with the robotics know the kind of challenges that they face when they have to build robots, which kind of have to operate in these scenarios. Seemingly looking very simple activities require a creative response because we are introduced to new scenarios every day, every time, and we have to respond in them. So what I'm saying is that creativity is not just for the special people who have created big things in life, but it's something that we deal with, we have the faculty, and we need that faculty both for the purpose of surviving in this world, as well as for the purpose of the joy that we derive from it. So having established what creativity from looking from this angle, and now I'll just put some kind of a classifications into that. So what we talk about in the creativity literature, these are called as personal creativity and the historical creative, big C creativity or the small c creativity. For our purposes, we'll look at these. So personal creativity is what I'm talking about in the what we call the creativity in the mundane. is that whenever we are daily activity, or for example, a child who is doing a painting for the first time and he's drawing something. So as far as his world is concerned, or he or she is learning a new language, as far as that person is concerned, it's an entirely new world. And he has to take creative decisions to get to that. He has to apply his or her creative faculty. But that creativity is not kind of thought of as that it will change the course of the human society. So that's at a personal level. And the same thing is also another part of the literature called as a small c creativity. For our purposes, we'll treat personal p creativity and small c creativity as similar. And the historical creativity, in which we not just have to produce something, but we have to produce something which is different from what has happened in the history till now. So that's a historical creativity. So if you're filing a new patent, writing a new research paper, winning, of course, the Nobel Prize, etc., you have indulged in that kind of, because you have also taken the context about where the civilization has advanced till now, and where we are kind of distinguished between these. I'm mentioning about these things is because these things become important when we are designing computational systems, which have to know about what kind of creativity are they dealing with, because the field is notorious for its loose definitions, because it's creativity as it's understood is a very, very cultural contest. So having cleared that, I will just use Margaret and Bowden, another researcher in this area, to kind of classify the kind of creativities into three parts. We'll call them exploratory, combinatorial, and transformational. I'll give you quick examples and hope they sink in. Let us say that if you know something about, so exploratory by its name as it seems, is that you have already a field established and you're trying to create something new within the boundaries and the rules of that field. So for those who are familiar with, let's say, Hindustani classical music, etc., if you look at the raga system, and if you, let us say, you take rag Yamuna, rag Bhairav, or Bhairavi, whichever you want to take, and then you want to do, let us say, a new bandish or a composition based on that. So you will be working within that framework of that raga, that you will be dealing with those particular notes, and you'll be creating a composition based on that. Okay, so, but the combinations that you can create can be almost infinite, the kind of tunes that you can create out of it, but they'll be still within the rules of that raga. So let's call that exploratory. Let's go to another form, which is a combinatorial, which means you take a concept from one field and take the concept from the other field and then combine them together and create entirely new things. As you start thinking of it after, if you're already not familiar with this, you will find many, many examples in your domain, that whatever domain that you're dealing with. So I will continue with this music example. So let us say that we have a Hindustani classical music, and let us say that we have a Western classical music, and let us say that Ravi Shankar and the Beatles come together. Although Beatles were not doing classical music, Western classical, but let us say that they are doing a different genre. And then they combine together to create a new music. So you have taken two different forms and combined them to create entirely two different things. So combining of this concept is the combinatorial form of the creativity. The third is a very similar to the one, but which almost causes the change in the field itself. That you kind of create, not just kind of, you're not just confined to the same rules of the game, but you kind of also change the rules of the game and create an entirely new space. So example is, let us take the example of atonal music. Not many will be familiar, but let's understand it that mostly all our songs that we do is kind of based on a certain raga system, okay, about certain notes, and there is always in Hindustani classical music a bass note from where we have to come at. Similarly, there is a key in the Western concept. You work in the key of C, D, etc. In classical Indian music, we are working on a sa, and every composition will finally come and rest on the sa. That's a tone. So in Arnold Schoenberg, if I remember correctly, was his name, who went into the atonal system. So he said that why can't we create songs which kind of do not follow any kind of a tone system, that there's no bass note to which the song has to return or the composition has to return. So that kind of he created, and he also became successful in whatever he was promoting. But he also had the experience of working in the field for a long period of time before he could attempt something. So transformation is something, change, which is very difficult to accept. Not many people accept it today also, but it plays a kind of role. So this is a simple framework that I'm setting up before I go into the computational creativity. Now, as we have seen these people, and I was talking about these artists and the entrepreneurs and the scientists and the inventors, I was also talking about the process that we are following. So that means it's not just the theory of relativity that Einstein gave, or the gramophone that Edison came up with, or the chemical theories that Marie Curie gave, or the music compositions that Beethoven made. But it's not just the product, the final creative art that is important. It's also the process in about how which they created it. So you really have to, if you have to do something, a new composition in the Indian classical music, you have to spend months and sometimes years with a particular learning that one single raga to be able to, at some point, be able to create something new. So there is a process in which we understand the field and then start innovating within that kind of a field. And then creative. So what a process Rahman follows for creating a new composition, what a process R.D. Burman used to follow for creating a new musical composition is again very specific to the person, but it's an important part of understanding creativity. The person, we said, is our mental faculty, how risk averse we are, how much we do not get discouraged by somebody's comments, and how dissatisfied we are with the present scenario that we want to change it. These are the kind of your mental faculties or the attitudes that also change the things. And finally is the press, where it is that the environment. If you do not have an encouraging environment, the creativity will not happen. If I talk to many people and I look at companies which are innovative and which can do the things, big factor almost, if you go by the research, is like, it is the kind of environment that's the enabler. It's very easy to kill the new ideas and very difficult to sustain them, good ones. Okay, now let me come to the part about computational creativity. So I will just now simplify the definition of computational creativity. It's like as simple as can the machine be a creative artist? Can it be a creative entrepreneur? Can it be a creative common person? And can the machine now create new, surprising, and valuable artifacts? So when we are almost now pushing the boundaries of the AI when we start looking at these problems. And the field itself is a very kind of multidisciplinary. We take the kind of input from the AI, computer science, cognitive science, robotics, neuroscience, psychology, and the philosophy. So all inputs in creating definition, in trying to understand what is the interplay of the creativity and the creation of the artifacts. So I'll just go through now a few examples and how things. So Sarah McHarmon used to work on a system when she was a graduate student, and she wrote a kind of a program, very simple, with some kind of a grammars, and she generated something that was accepted for the library. And if you look at it, this looks quite a nice poem, that she drank her silence in the drifty afternoon when the love was soft and the silken lavender, but soon the sweet darkness sing to them in a fizzy bubbles of electrical joy. So even if it doesn't totally make sense, but still sounds poetic, and she could achieve it with very simple grammar rules and setting up those grammars and generating from them. But actually there was no meaning attached to it. And later on she moved to something more meaningful and bringing the aspects of clarity, novelty, aptness, and surprise. That means that you will now not just create something, but also see if these qualities are present in an artifact. So figure 8 is a kind of which creates these kind of a similes. The withered cities, sweating with the haze, spoke to him like a friend. So there is a more meaning attached to things. But now let me give you a kind of hint about where these present poetic systems are. And so you cannot achieve success with them totally unless you go to the point of understanding the language itself. To just give you one simple example, I wanted to create my speaker's introduction in the form of a poem through these generators, but I could not come across one which could convert my ideas which were written in prose form and automatically convert into the poem, which I would find kind of a reasonably useful. And then later on, I kind of try to do some stuff on my own just to have some fun. But the idea is that until these systems get to the point where they can not just appreciate the language, understand it some kind of a meaningful way, and that's require a huge thing, because we need to have a general common sense and the knowledge of the world to be able to kind of go there. But that's where these systems need to go. Though many of these outputs appear poetic and kind of something will be impressed with, but still a lot of work has to go before they start becoming self-expressing systems. Because the kind of a system that now, if you give them keywords, etc., they will generate a poem for you, okay? And that poem might be a little meaningful too, but that's not the poem that you want. So that's a machine doing something, not the expression that you want out of that particular poem. Okay. I'll just also give you one example from the music world of this robot called Shyman. Professor Gil Winberg has been working in Georgia Tech. He's both a jazz musician as well as a computer scientist, robotic scientist, who has been working and creating a robot which, because if you are familiar with the jazz, it's again a very kind of a improvisational system that once you get into, once you have got the good hold of the system, field in that particular genre, you then, whenever you collaborate with the other people in a very spontaneous way. So his was to kind of a create. I'll just give you, I hope you will be able to see it. I'll run it for half a minute or a minute, and just see it from, look at the input that he is giving, and look at the way the robot is kind of listening to it. It's a marimba playing, and slowly, once it gets the initial input, then it starts composing on its own, and suddenly starts shifting to a totally autonomous mode. And the rest of the performance will be a very collaborative process where it's doing its own composition, listening to the other musicians, and then they're collaboratively playing.
Dr. Jamwal, we're not able to hear the music.
Oh, you're not able to hear the music? I don't know what should.
So while sharing, there's a checkbox which says share my computer audio. So if that's checked, then it will allow you to.
Okay, I'll just go to the share again. Okay, share my computer sound. Okay, I'll run it again. Could you hear my audio while I was doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Now
so
we can hear.
Now you can just kind of listen to it for a few seconds from this point onwards. So I think that's the flavor that I wanted to give you. You can listen to it more later. So what's a Simon is basically a marimba playing robot, which has 4 arms and 8 sticks. If you look at closely, you can look at many videos that are available on the YouTube, and you also go to professor's site to read further on how it's done. So basically it has a knowledge base of 5,000 songs, right from Beethoven to Beatles to Lady Gaga and the Miles Davis, etc. It has something like 2 million motifs and riffs, and that's the short pieces of tunes that you can make it learn. It uses, of course, the deep learning neural network. Is a very latest form of, because it's now that the music is shifting to the neural network based music. Earlier, we had different schemes of doing the knowledge base for these music. So what is his aim? So because professor also gets asked this question many times, are you trying to replace a musician? And the computational creativity field faces the biggest challenge of getting the people, particularly the artists, kind of make them amenable to these ideas, because they don't, it's usually not welcome. Because are you trying to replace us? What is going to do? So there is a fear, there is a skepticism, and there is a sometimes apathy about, oh, this is a computer generated, so it's not real music. So, but Professor himself being a musician, his idea is, can the robots become musically creative and generate new music that humans could find beautiful, inspiring, and strange? And that's where this his particular research is going on. I'll just mention one of the industry example. Early industry example was in something called what the IBM did once they had Watson, and they tried to build a creativity engine on the top of that. And they did it with respect to the cooking and the culinary recipes. So basically what they did was took a lot of online, something like 30,000 online recipes. They collaborated with the Culinary Institute of the New York. They took a lot of nutritional facts and from the US Department of Agriculture. They built the information models based on the ingredients, the flavor compounds, the structures at the molecule level. They said that's how the knowledge base was created. The idea objective of this system was to create, can we create wonderful recipes which the human beings can actually consume? And the last conference that I went to, they had actually come up, there was one person had put up a stall about selling various packets that these are the recipes of some powders, something that can be kind of a quickly cooked kind of stuff that have been prepared by using this technology. Okay, the idea is that now once you create an artifact, because one of the challenges, as you've been looking at the various talks also in the discovery of the knowledge, is that you can create new concepts, you can generate, you can set up generative algorithms, and they can give you innumerable options. But how do you zero in on something that's useful and valuable for you? So one of the things, and how do you check whether it's a novel with respect to the rest of things? So one of the things that they used for that, they came up with a method of kind of Bayesian surprise to look at the novelty of the systems, and then they use for the flavors, they use the olfactory pleasant, the regression models for those things. Okay, this is another system which is kind of, we looked at Simon, and we looked at how it is collaboratively doing the music with this with other things. So you can be, it's autonomous also because it's creating its own composition and it's collaborating also. So other experiments, particularly let us say in the drawing field, has been done by Nicholas Davis and his team in the Georgia Tech. You look at these two stretches that I'm putting up there. In the first series, there is a human and a machine which is kind of a collaborating together to create these sketches. And these are very elementary sketches done by ordinary people or the children. In the second, it's the human-to-human collaboration. Again, the machine has been replaced by one person sitting in a remote room. So they do not know each other. So basically the setup for both system is same, that they do not know that whether it's a person or a machine they're collaborating with, but this. And you look at if the pieces, etc., you will see that they're quite, you can't really say that which series belong to human-machine collaboration and which is a human-human collaboration. At least I couldn't. Okay, I'll just go into the kind of a visual art a bit more, because look at the work of the Simon Colton, and I would kind of people who are interested in this area to go to his site and look at his work, because although we see many of the examples of particular drawing, but he has spent over 10 years, more than 10 years, building this system called Painting Fool, which not just is great, has the infrastructure for doing the paintings, but also has many semantic layers of creativity and looking at what goes into the process of creation of the art. So this is a self-portrait that his system created. Let's quickly move on to, I'll just use this as, this is from one of his papers about, see, we look at, we appreciate an artifact only when we know the labor and the knowledge that is gone behind it. If you know something is so cheaply created or there is no thought that has gone behind it, as a piece of art, that's not useful. So this is to create a kind of artist which can be taken seriously by the people. So one of they came up with the concept of a skillful, the skillfulness, and for something to be considered really an artist, it should display the skill, it should have an appreciation for the art, and it should be able to imagine on its own. I'll just show you an example here. There are two pictures that There one on the left hand side that you see is generated from the body grammar that was done. Like you kind of create the shapes of the body and create a grammar for different kind of a movement, and then create art pieces out of that. The right hand side is a picture of the Afghan war, and that is from the actual piece went by reading the Guardian articles on the Afghan war and creating a painting and a collage out of it. And if you kind of are able to decipher out of it, you will see there is a Afghan lady somewhere on the right, and there are bomb blasts that are happening. There is an airfield that is there. There are some open fields. There are kind of uh, uh, aeroplanes which are flying around, the fighter planes, etc. And there are rows and rows of perhaps paratroopers. So it kind of considered it. It went through the sentimental analysis of whatever those pieces of, try to give understand a meaning by looking at try to go through this Google database of images, of getting the relevant images for that particular article, and then creating a collage out of that. uh, Other in the same field is new interesting things that, as we all are now familiar with the GANs, etc., and that autoencoders that we have, that have kind of unleashed a new series of things that we can do with it once your neural network has been trained. So basically, the idea is that you had earlier a classification network, right? You kind of gave it a multiple examples, and it helped you to classify whether it's a cat or a dog or a deer or the cloud, etc., or a tree or something. And then you started asking the reverse question, is that now that you have got some kind of understanding at different layers of the features, higher level features of that particular class of data input, now if I give you a label, what is that your understanding of the thing? And that led to something called, people might have heard about the Google Dream, etc., is that when you kind of a feedback the output image and ask it to reinterpret it, understand it, and go further into. So for example, if you have an image of a cloud and you give it to the kind of analyzer, it will try to figure out the things within that it can identify within those things. And let us say that it can identify a deer and some different tree, etc. And then it will try to get the images of those things and superimpose it on the earlier images. And then it's a recursive process that goes on and on. But these kind of things are giving us the idea about, do the similar kind of things happen in the human brain also? And does this actually have to do something with the creative assimilation of the things? So this sets on a very different path from the earlier work that has happened on the creativity, when we are now able to create a, not just a rules-based system, but have a system which has some understanding and notion of the labels. But again, we are at a very early stage. We now want more and more disentanglement to happen at the kind of latent space, so that we can control this output through features. But already artists are doing amazing things based on that. So a similar kind of work has been carried further to create what is called creative art networks, in which it's like a GAN only, which many of you people must be understanding. But besides that, there is a discriminator and there is a kind of a generator, and they kind of compete with each other. You also kind of classify 25 different artistic styles. So besides checking whether it's a real or a fake, you also check whether it belongs to these artistic styles or not. And if it belongs, you kind of reject it. So the idea is that, can you create new genres of paintings which do not belong to the early classifications? And these are some of the examples from that. Okay, this was me trying to kind of experiment with a few of the things that you could. Now it's very accessible and everyone can play with these kind of things. Though not, the control is still at the code level if you want to change the parameters, etc. But now these are getting into the popular domain. So I gave you kind of a broader idea of about, give you examples of different fields in which the things are happening, and potentially, as you see with the human creativity, we can apply it anywhere. You have these kind of, this is how I classify them, and that you have art and you have design and other. The way I see it is, in arts, visual art, music, literature, performance, of course, the creativity is very apparent because these are generally thought about to be the creative fields. But you look at the product design, architecture, fashion, and software, etc., and you can possibly work in any of these applications. And as the subject of this particular discussion is about Nobel Prize in science, the scientific discovery and invention. and it has been discussed by many panelists here. So not go further into it. So gaming, decision support systems, etc., and marketing advertisement are the kind of new areas that may looking for the application. I give you an example first so that when I come to this slide, it's easy to understand what is the core architecture of the system. The thing with this present creative system is that if I build a creative system for, let us say, music, I cannot easily use it for, let us say, for art, for visual art. If I create something for voice synthesis, I cannot use it for something else. So at the present, it's very domain specific and restricted to the groups or research groups that are present here. But if we just want to understand the meta architecture of any kind of these system, this is where we go. So as you saw, I just quickly give you examples so that it's easy to understand. Let us say that take the example of music only, that you want to create a domain knowledge about how you want to create, as you saw in the case of Simon, that it has a database of so many sounds, etc. That is in the neural network side. If we look at the classical earlier approaches, we need to have knowledge graphs and semantic networks, etc., created to create that kind of knowledge base or the context specific grammars. The concept generator is, and I will divide this figure into two parts. If you see the left-hand side part, there are two evaluators. One is the internal, let us say one is the external. We usually call it the genotypes and the phenotypes, but let us take the internal representation. That internally, you will be looking at music like the melody notes or the harmony and the kind of schemes that are there, and putting them in the form, let us say, hidden Markov chains, or context-free grammars, or context, whichever way that you want to kind of represent those things there. And then doing a kind of a concept generation based on these architectures, these internal representation. And then you will be evaluating at every point about saying, is this the kind of a thing that I wanted to produce? So if you have to have some definition of equality. What's the kind of output that you kind of want to select? Is it aesthetically appealing? And each field, whether it's music, it will create its own aesthetics. And it's this part of aesthetics is the most difficult part because it's not easy for kind of a machine to understand what a human aesthetic is and how to kind of relate to that, until perhaps in the future we can teach it to kind of learn that aesthetics also. So the idea is once you have created the internal representation and now created a score, then to put it into a form, let us say music sheet or a MIDI output, and then actually run it and see, run it through a cognitive listener. Again, that can be human or that can be a machine if it can understand, and then see that what is the output. Is it something, again, you will look for newness in that and the value for that. And the value can be as simple as it's pleasing, it's aesthetically pleasing, or if it's a product, it's something that will give you a good return in the market, etc. So you set your aesthetics parameters depending upon your domain and do this. But this is the core architecture of any kind of a system. Now I'll just the question about what could be and where is the future for this. And I'll just give you example. Most of, and many of you might have heard about the portrait of Edmond Bellamy, which was created by some 25-year-old French students taking up the code from a GitHub. And they created this, and in 2018, it was sold in the Christie's. And the value of the system is that it was actually sold for a certain amount of money, not banned at all. So now whether it was bought because it was first of its kind of that painting in the literature, or is it kind of its portent for the future about where the things can go, and people will slowly start getting warmed up to think, as long as they're finding some meaning or some usefulness in that artifact, it's up to the human society to decide what we want from these outputs and how we'll be using that in future. But I'm just giving you a concrete example of real money value coming in the real life. Now, as far as the theme of this conference or the seminar that we have been discussing for the 2 days, and I'll try to answer them in my own framework, that principally there are 4 kind of creative systems that you can look for when you're looking at the computer system. One is the independent creator. That means it will totally build something. It will create it. You ask it, okay, give me a music piece in this genre for this kind of a mood, and it will totally create it for you, and you use it, the output, as you take it. Another kind can be creative collaborator. We also saw as the kind of assignment was working or that to the sketch system where the people were collaboratively doing the drawings. And many of, I believe, our future kind of successful systems, creative systems will be in this area of creative collaborators. There is also thing that you, in both 1 and 2, the machine has to have some responsibility and the understanding of the creative capability. That means it has some creative capabilities and also it understands the creative process. Then you can have a system which may or may not be aware of creativity or the ability of creativity, but it can help you achieve something. For example, today the Photoshop system is there, a word system helps you to kind of recognize, but more sophisticated system that kind of trigger creativity in the process, and you are able to kind of work with them, but they in creating the creative artifacts, and they'll go to kind of your Logic Pro, etc. will go to the next level. The creativity coach is that the system is such that it can train you for creativity. That means, for example, you play a video game with it for 10 minutes and you come out as a better creative person. Or you spend some, let us say, 1 year in doing a certain kind of exercises that this system kind of gives you. You become a better creative person because it kind of understands where to pinch you and how to train you for better creativity. So it's a kind of a creativity coach that you have. So where do we place them? As far as winning the Nobel, or for that matter, Grammy and Oscar or any other award, I think the 1 and 2, the 1 can get Nobel. I don't think looking at the talks in a very near future, 2050, your target, maybe, would be very keenly looking at it. Creative collaborator, perhaps sooner than the 1, but can you then put the machine as one of your co-authors for a research paper? That's the question. If you can, then both of you get a Nobel Prize. And if it's a kind of a Nobel Prize winning idea, the process support level is more like a kind of, I have a tool with me. For example, a musician has a guitar and a painter has his set of colors and the paints. I love those and I cherish those, and they are part of me. And I will do, even for if in Indian system, do puja on a particular, perhaps on the Dashera day for those instruments. But nobody will give an award for that. Creativity coach is something people will acknowledge during the Nobel Prize or the Grammy or the Oscar speeches, that I owe my present state to my creativity coach, which is actually a machine. And I have been kind of dealing with it and working with it for the last 10 years or 15 years or 5 years or whatever the case might be. Okay, so I just final.
Yeah, sorry, I'm so sorry. This has been absolutely fascinating, but we've run out of time, and that's the sad task of the time cop has to interrupt and stop the flow. But it was absolutely fascinating. If we can just do one quick question, we're about to run to a break, and I would suggest that after Dr. Jamwal answers this one question, there's another question in the Q&A. If you could answer it from within Zoom, and then we'll prompt you for anything else that's occurred in the chat.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And it was very interesting to hear about Arnold Schoenberg and atonality, which is was a term he detested, even though he invented his own rules about tonal models. So very quick question then. Where was the earliest one? Given that ragas in Indian classical music rely on phrase modulations and note intonation rather than only on note values, do you think Western music will be easier to create by an AI, which relies more on note values?
Yes, so this is more of the kind of a question about physical creation of the musical piece, right? Because notes, we can hit them kind of easily create them, and our present system, generating system, can easily create those nodal systems. Whereas the intonation of a particular note, like we call it swaras in Indian classical music, it's about how do we slide from one note to another. And if we're looking at particularly the third note or the fourth note, and that we'll be kind of hovering around it before kind of settling on it, and the mean, etc., that is present in the music. So I think the process of creation might be kind of go parallel if we understand. Not many people understand Indian classical music in the depth that one needs to understand. I don't, for example, and and it's not easily transferable. So I think the challenge is in understanding it and trying to convert it to the form, not in the physical form of the slides and the guides. Those, I think, with some effort can be replicated.
Thank you very much. And this was fascinating. If we had more time, I would pin you down with lots of questions as
No,
well.
I'm totally done, and thank you for giving me this time.
No, thank you for being part of this.
Thank you.
So everybody, we're going to take a very quick 5-minute break just to claw back a little bit of time for our final speaker. And just to remind everybody that we've sent out feedback forms as we did yesterday. It would be fantastic if you could take a couple of minutes to fill those out and get them back to us. And also, if you feel so inclined to tweet about your experiences from today, the screen that will come up in a second will have the hashtag values there. So see you all in 5 minutes. Thank you.